In this lesson, we will be discussing planning for server installation. Before you deploy Windows Server 2012, you need to understand how each of the Windows Server 2012 editions might benefit your organization's servers. You also need to know whether a particular hardware configuration is appropriate for your Windows Server 2012. You need to know whether a virtual deployment might be more suitable than a physical deployment, and also which installation source allows you to deploy Windows Server 2012 in an efficient manner. If you do not have an understanding of these issues, you could end up costing your organization time and money by making a choice that you must later correct. This lesson, Planning for Server Installation, provides an overview of the various Windows Server 2012 editions, the installation options, hardware requirements, upgrade requirements. Using this information, you then should be able to determine which Server 2012 edition and installation options are right for your organization. We want to take a look at the different editions. We have on the left the edition and on the right the description. Let's start with Windows Server 2012 Standard Operating System. If you're going to be choosing this edition, you need to know that this edition supports up to 64 sockets and 4 terabytes of RAM. It also includes 2 virtual machines. It gives you all of the roles and the features that are available on the Windows Server 2012 R2 platform. It also gives you 2 virtual machine licenses. That means that if you install this edition, you're only going to be able to have 2 virtual machine licenses. The edition below the standard that we have here on screen is the Windows Server 2012 Data Center Operating System. Now, this edition is similar in some ways to the standard operating system. It is similar in that it gives you all the roles and features for the 2012 R2 platform. But here's a big difference. While the standard operating system only gives you 2 virtual machine licenses, the data center operating system includes unlimited virtual licenses for virtual machines that run on the same hardware. So it supports up to 64 sockets, 64 processor cores, and up to 4 terabytes of RAM. So if you are running an organization, and the organization maybe is a medium-sized organization, you might want to look at standard operating system. If you are looking at an enterprise where your organization has many different domains, maybe in different countries or different parts of your country, where you operate several servers, you might need to run the data center operating system. Most people use the data center operating system for running lots of virtual machines. Then you have the Windows Server 2012 Foundation operating system. Now this one is designed for small businesses because it only allows you 15 users. And besides that, you cannot join it to a domain. And the roles are limited. While you have standard and data center giving you all the available roles, if you're going to use Foundation, some of those roles will not be available to you. The Foundation edition also supports one processor core and up to 32 gigabytes of RAM. Then you have the Server Essentials operating system and the next edition of Small Business Server. This is now available in two forms. You have it, you can run it as an installable server role in an existing domain, or you can run it as a core Windows Server edition on a virtual machine. You cannot create a virtual machine if you are running Server 2012 Essential. It does not function as a Hyper-V server. It will not function as a failover cluster. You also will not be able to use server core installation on it. Server core is managed by a command line. So you're either using Microsoft's Windows PowerShell command line, or you're using the command line interface, rather than using the graphical user interface based tools that you would use with the standard or the data center, which actually uses the GUI or GUI, meaning graphical user interface. The Essentials operating system will limit you to 25 users and only 50 devices. So you need to know all of this information before you decide what operating system you're going to install on your machine. You also need to know the hardware requirements, because remember, you are going to be making the recommendations for purchase. In my organization, we have to fill out a requisition form saying exactly what we need, and that requisition form is sent to the purchasing department. So you have to make sure and choose the right hardware equipment. You don't want to purchase a piece of hardware equipment, and then when the equipment comes, you find out after the fact that the equipment cannot do what you need to do in your environment. So let's take a look at the requirements. The processor. The minimum requirement for Server 2012 or R2 is 1.4 gigahertz. Microsoft recommends 2 gigahertz or faster. For the memory, we're going to be using 512 megabytes of RAM minimum, and for Microsoft recommended, we're going to be using 2 gigabytes of RAM or greater. What about your available disk space? Again, if you're in the classroom, not in a production environment, you can use 32 gig. Microsoft recommends 40 gig or greater. But remember, you will know what you're going to be using in your environment because you would have known how many users you have, the amount of space that you need according to your organizational needs. So even though Microsoft recommends 40 gig, you might indeed in your production environment need more available disk space than that, depending on what's happening within your environment. You also need your optical drive, your DVD-ROM, as a requirement. Let's take a look at the different versions as it relates to upgrading. Now, if this is the first time you're installing Server 2012 and you're installing it on a new machine, then you're going to do what we call a clean install. So you're either installing the operating system on a new machine, or a clean install also involves installing the operating system on a machine that has an existing system, but what you'll be doing is overwriting that operating system. Now here we have an upgrade chart. If you are running presently 2008 R2 data center with Service Pack 1, you can do the upgrade to 2012 R2 data center. If you're running Server 2008 R2 Enterprise with Service Pack 1, you can upgrade to 2012 R2 Standard or Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center. If you are running Server 2008 R2 Standard with Service Pack 1, you can upgrade to Windows Server 2012 Standard or Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center. If you're running Web Server 2008 R2 with Service Pack 1, then you can upgrade to Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard. If you're running Server 2012 Data Center, you can upgrade to the same thing on Server 2012 R2 Data Center. If you're running Server 2012 Standard, you can upgrade to Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard or Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center, both of them. If you're running Hyper-V Server 2012, then you can upgrade to the same thing on 2012 R2. If you're running Windows Storage Server 2012 Standard, you can upgrade to Windows Storage Server 2012 R2 Standard. And if you're running Windows Storage Server 2012 Workgroup, you can upgrade to Windows Storage Server 2012 R2 Workgroup. Now you might be asking yourself at this point, but suppose I am running Windows Server 2003. What is going to happen to me? Well, if you don't see the current version that you're running in the left column, then you cannot upgrade to Server 2012 R2. It's not supported. What you would have to do if you're running 2003 is you would have to install a new Server 2012 operating system on a machine. Once you have done that installation, what you are able to do is to migrate your users, your computers, your groups, your settings over to the Server 2012 R2. But there's no upgrade path from Server 2003 to Server 2012 R2. As a matter of fact, the operating system that you're using for 2003, you can use 86-bit. But remember, for Server 2012, you have to be using a 64-bit processor. So it's a different platform altogether as far as architecture. What about the actions that you could perform during installation? Well, we can do a clean installation, and this basic concept again is you are actually installing the operating system on a new machine, or you are overwriting an old operating system on an existing machine. If you choose to upgrade, It means that you're moving from your existing operating system to more recent release, and we just went over the different options that are available while you stay on the same hardware. What about license? Let's say you have an operating system and you have license for that operating system and you decide to upgrade. What you want to be able to do, and with some of the editions, some particular editions support being able to upgrade your license in a single step with a simple command and appropriate license key. And then we talked about migration. You can migrate from your 2003 to your 2012 while you can't upgrade. You have to be careful with that migration too, because some of the systems, I find that some of the previous operating systems, since 2003 especially, your hard drive is old, meaning you have had it a long time if you're using 2003. And that drive might have some bad clusters. So you want to make sure that when you are migrating, that all the clusters are working. So to me, that's a disadvantage if you're going to be migrating over your information, if you're still using server 2003. Now, another thing that I guess you will need to bear in mind would be the different roles and the features that are available. We're going to be paying close attention to Active Directory users and computers, because Active Directory users and computers will be the place where you're going to be creating your users, creating your computers, creating your groups. You're going to be giving permissions to different folders, different files. Another important tool here is the group policy management tool, where it's quite different from Server 2003, where we did group policy within the Active Directory. Here we have a separate tool in 2012, R2 Core Group Policy Management, which we will go into in a next session. This is the end of this lesson. Thank you for listening.